Yo, what's going on guys? Inzem here, and today I have a completely different type of video for you guys where I'm actually going to be going over what I like to believe is a few neutral tips that can actually help a lot of people out because they've helped me out a lot in the past. So like always, if you guys want more of this type of content, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let's get into the video. Okay, so little disclaimer before we get into this video, you will have to remember that neutral, especially in a fighting game, is like a fast-paced chess match, is the closest analogy I can give you to it. And although the tips that I'm going to give you guys are extremely good, and I would highly recommend using them layer 1, you have to remember that these aren't built in absolutes. If your opponent knows you're going to do any of these things, that means it will almost become one of the worst options because they will know exactly how to counterplay it. But even with that being said, again, I do believe these to be very strong on layer 1, and I highly recommend using these, at least until you have a better grasp on how to deal with neutral. But with that being said, let's talk about it. So the first tip I have for you guys, and again, these are going to be in order of importance because I feel like the ones in front are going to be useful for understanding the ones in the back, but this one actually becomes into play when you are starting a match. When you're starting a match, I think it's very important to look at their team and actually analyze what their team is good at. And what I mean by that is when you're loading into the game, you want to pay attention to the point character, right? What tools do the point character have? What parts of the screen do they occupy? And kind of use that to tell you how you should play. But you also have to do that for their assists because it can drastically change how you have to deal with the team. So I have two teams here, for example, right? The team on the left and the team on the right. So for the team on the left, let's say you were loading into the game and you saw this team on the left. The one thing you'd notice is Team Gohan has good ki blast and he has a layered on the ground, though he doesn't really have ways to stop you from being in the air. So if you think about that, because it's Team Gohan, that kind of tells you want to be in the air a little more often than not, like, compared to another character who might not have a strong ground control. But when you look at the assists, it will tell you that this team wants to zone, right? Let's say you saw both A assists. If you see both these assists with Team Gohan, you can kind of get the gist that this team wants to lock you down with ki blast or catch on the ground with the lariat, right? So that will kind of tell you what part of the screen you have to play at, right? Also, because these are two neutral assists, I can also tell you that you want to get close to them because this team kind of looks like it just wants to zone you out, right? Kind of like pester you full screen with ki blast plus assists and stuff. So what that tells you is, it means you kind of want to be in the air a little bit more, and you also want to get close. You kind of don't want to let this team just stay full screen the whole game because that would enable its game plan, right? But keep in mind, even if teams can look similar, it can like change a lot, right? So if you look at the team on the right, it's basically the same team, but one character's changed. Instead of Android 21, you have Android 18's barrier assist, and that can completely change the matchup. Because let's say you're facing the team on the right, yes, it's still the same character, Team Gohan, with the same supporting assists, but if you are close to this team, you cannot just pull up on the team and kind of press buttons because it has a barrier assist. So despite if you're facing on the team on the left, it will kind of tell you that you want to get aggressive, kind of get in its face and run your offense. If you're facing the team on the right, you have to be very careful about being close to this team as long as the barrier assist is active, right? Because if you get too close and try to take a turn, you're going to hit the barrier assist and you're going to get hit for a pretty high damage combo. So keep that in mind. The next tip I have for you guys is actually paying attention at round start. So again, like I said, I mentioned the first tip first because I recommend doing that as the game is loading up, like when you see the characters and stuff, because you don't want to do that in a match because you're wasting a lot of precious time to make decisions and stuff. But let's say you already did that and you're loading into the round start and you are facing either of these teams, right? Team Gohan, for the most part, actually has some pretty decent round starts. Obviously, any character could be passive and just jump away, whatever, right? But the more aggressive round starts is kind of what you want to be paying attention to. And as far as Team Gohan goes, his aggressive round starts will look something like maybe ki blast plus assist if he wants to set up his neutral structure immediately, or like doing something like this and running up at you. Or let's say the round start he does lariat, right? Let's say I set him to quick. Round start he'd actually be doing medium because he doesn't have medium. Let's say round start he does this, right? Because this is a very aggressive round start that could be pretty useful for him. So in this situation, you don't want to backdash round start against a team like this because realistically, there's a lot of different options that this character has available to you that will actually beat backdash. Instead, you might want to take a better approach, like let's say jumping backwards. because the character tools in the team can't realistically reach you there around start. So example would look like this. And if you do this, you're in a pretty good situation, because not only did they put themselves in a pretty weird situation because it missed, they also could potentially waste resources. Let's say he uses assist, which he won't get back for around 7 to 10 seconds, depending on how long the assist takes to despawn. And you can use this advantage to your favor and kind of win neutral a lot easier because they are down a resource. So this is like really important. So I have another team here for another example, so you can kind of understand what I meant by this. And let's say you are facing this team on the right? Adult Gohan A assist, which is a DP assist, Base Vegeta's anti-air assist is A assist, and S Broly. So in this example, looking at the team, you can tell this team has a lot of air control, especially at round start, because he has Eraser Blow, which covers the air, and his assist cover the air. So unlike the first team I showed you, in this situation, you might not want to choose a back round start, because if you do, a very common round start option he would have is something that catches it, and the chance of you losing neutral would be pretty high. Instead, a better round start to do would be backdash, right? Because in this situation, against this team, as you can see, it gets away from the neutral structure, and you can maybe even punish it if you're quick enough. Another round start this team could potentially do is somebody has a DP assist, something like Adult Gohan A, Teen Gohan A, or maybe even Blue Gogeta B assist. Super Dash plus assist is very strong because it brings you to the ground relatively easily. And for a game that kind of already lacks a lot of anti-airs to it, and the anti-airs are generally weaker than in other games, this serves kind of like an anti-air because it drags you to the ground. And even if this is a strong round start, again, if you choose backdash round start, you have more than enough time to 2H it, while also avoiding the other round starts. So like I said, depending on the team, you also want to change how you want to play, so that you can cover most options safely, right? So the third tip I have for you guys is something that has been, in my opinion, one of the most useful tips I've received. The person who told me this was Nitro, and fun little trivia fact, he also told me the person who told him this was Sonic Fox. So this one comes from a pretty reliable source, right? Which is, don't try to force your turn in neutral, let good neutral win you turns. And what I mean by that is, don't be so eager to force your turn, even though I know how much people want to run their offense. The more and more you try to do that, especially in ways that kind of feels like you're trying to steal a turn almost, like just win neutral instantly without really working for it, the riskier it is. And especially depending on the team, right? And on the team on the right, we have everyone's favorite team, right? Double Fusion's Lab Coat. Against a team like this, you really don't want to scramble with it too much, because you can basically almost guarantee yourself getting hit if you try to do something like that, because neutral is very finicky. You don't want to try to force your turn, because the chances of you getting hit is pretty high, especially if you aren't being very careful about it and you're not picking carefully when you choose to engage. So I have an example to show you what I mean by that is. So let's say this character is trying to jump in on you, right? Like this. An example of trying to force your turn would be, you see him miss this, and you try to run up and take your turn, regardless of his assist or up. And let's say he calls his defensive assist like that, you'll just get hit, right? You kind of engaged in the scramble, even though it may have seemed like it wasn't going to be a scramble. So a good little tip to deal with this is, just choose to leave scrambles more often than not, and make sure that when you do want to get aggressive and neutral, you do it on your own terms, not their terms. So a better example of how to deal with this would look something like this. You leave and get away from it. And if you do this, as you'll notice, you'll reset back to neutral, and once you are in this situation, the game looks a lot differently, because now he's down his assist and his neutral structure completely missed, and now you have a turn to set up your own. Like that, right? So, really good advice. Don't try to force your turn, and try your best not to engage in scrambles that often. So the fourth tip I have for you guys is another one that's really helpful for me, and this is kind of one I kind of came to make on my own, which is a pretty simple slogan I like to follow, which is avoid, reflect, block, and you do things in that order. And what I mean by that is, when you are playing neutral and your opponent is trying to get aggressive, or they're trying to take their turn in a way, whether that's just running up and taking their turn like this, approaching with the lariat, or even just trying to zone you away and lock you down with assists and key blasts, you want to, in this order, avoid, reflect, then block. If you can avoid something, you should always try to avoid it. And again, with the previous tip, Don't try to force your turn immediately after. Leave the scramble first and then try to take your turn. An example of this would be like this. So in this case, this is a very strong neutral structure, especially for base Vegeta, and you want to avoid it and get away from it. If you can't avoid it and you found yourself in a situation where you can't avoid it, you want to reflect it. And the reason why you want to reflect it is because if you reflect things in this game, you get a lot of extra options on defense that you normally would not have if you blocked it. So to show a few, you have reversal, you have reflect tag, which is a bit risky but also pretty strong, like that. And you can call your assist pretty fast in this situation as well if you reflect. And especially if you have a defensive assist, this is really, really strong because again, your opponent has to respect this. And if they don't, you get a free combo. And that's just to name a few of the defensive options you can do if you reflect. And the last one is block, which is if you can't avoid something and you can't reflect it. So let's say you blocked it in the air. So a better example would be something like this. Let's say you block this sequence in the air. It is okay to just block because you do not want to get hit. That is the absolute worst thing that can happen. You just get hit in neutral for free. You should always, always, always avoid that one. Again, it's in this order. If you can avoid it, always avoid it every single time. If you cannot avoid it, reflect it. And if you can't reflect it, just block. Never get hit. And the last tip I have for you guys kind of piggybacks off that one, which is the fifth one, is it is okay to be at disadvantage. This is something that I learned recently. A Marvel player actually called Ray taught me this one. And I kind of already knew this one, but having a player, especially more experienced one, emphasize it really opened my eyes to how good this can be, which is sometimes it's okay to be at disadvantage. Like I said, you never ever want to get hit. And a very common way people get hit in neutral is they are jumping around and stuff and they fall into an assist, and instead of just blocking the assist, they actually try to jump. And for those of you who don't know, jump actually has a 4-frame startup, meaning if you attempt to jump and within the first 4 frames something came into contact with you and you try to jump it, you will actually be hit. Try to show an example of that. So right here, as you can see, the game didn't say counter hit, so my JM didn't get hit. My jump frames got hit. And this is important because a lot of people will actually panic in a situation like this and actually try to do something. They'll try to mash, they'll try to reversal, even though they haven't reflected yet. They will try to jump, which is the most common one. Whichever the case, they will do something instead of just simply being okay with being at disadvantage, and then they'll get hit for it. And I know blocking is pretty scary, but think about it. What's worse, getting hit in neutral and the opponent didn't even have to mix you, or them winning neutral, them more than likely using a resource like an assist to lock you down, so they have less resources to mix you up, and then actually having to mix you, right? Versus just getting hit, holding up or something like that, or just getting hit falling down and stuff. Like this. It's a lot better to just be okay with being at disadvantage. So again, like always, if you guys like these more educational type of videos, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know some other ideas I can do for these type of videos, because I definitely try to do something a little different this time. This is something that's been pretty requested as far as people trying to learn how to play neutral, and I thought it'd be best to just kind of break it down into tips rather than a whole neutral guide, because neutral is very finicky and it can get very, very in-depth. So again, like always, if you guys enjoy this content, you know, and I'm gonna see you guys later. Peace.